You're listening to the Witchy Wit Podcast, Episode 2. We're talking about what is witchiness. Stay tuned.
Welcome to the Witchy Wit Podcast, where we look at life through a witchy lens. I'm Kimberlyn.
I'm Leilani.
At Witchy Wit, we explore current events,
Ideas,
music and books,
and experiences in ways that recognize energy and life in everybody and everything.
We are both real witches.
And we bring two real perspectives through the lens of our different ages,
Races,
and backgrounds.
with a healthy skepticism for what we have been told is true. Our conversations are raw, candid, and vulnerable.
Join us as we cast a spell to uncover what we each know is true in our intuitive, witchy selves.
So Leilani, how are things going?
So today I was thinking about hoods.
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 What about hoods?
I was just thinking about how much I love clothing with hoods on them.
Ah! See, I'm from the hood, so... Okay, continue, carry on.
We're getting closer to October. We're getting closer to Halloween and Samhain and everything that means, which means like jackets and things like that. But I just think that anything that I can wear, and if it has a hood on it, it becomes that much better.
Oh, so you're a hoodie person.
I am, but I like them on shirts or even like my workout tops. And recently, so my sister and I bought a cape from like Nine West or some like really muggly, mundane company. And I really loved it because it was a cape, like a little short one, stopped at my waist. But then I found one from another company that I really like, and it has a hood on it. And so I was like, I need a new one. I don't need a new one. But because that one has a hood, I'm really debating it.
So do you feel embraced by it or just really protected or what?
I feel witchy.
You feel, yeah.
And I feel witchy whether I'm at the grocery store or I'm at home or I'm, rolling into a club, not during COVID, but it just feels like a really nice way of bringing witchiness into my, so that's what I've been thinking about.
I get that. I have a trench coat that it's almost down to the ground and it has a big, one of those really big hoods that fall in front of your face so you don't get rained on. And I remember one year wearing it and pretending I was a Dementor, because it really covers everything. So I never thought about that, but I get it. Yeah, and it kind of harkens back to like an earlier time.
Yeah, definitely.
Wow, cool.
Yeah,
cool.
So what about you? What are you thinking about?
Well, I'm thinking about all of the fun of our first episode, and getting it loaded up and actually having it come to fruition, and it's sounding pretty decent to me, so this weekend I've been playing around with all of the settings and exploring different ways of finding it, and then once I was comfortable, it was up, it was done, I knew we were there. That was the first time I decided I was going to go and listen to some other witchy podcasts, and I was heartened to see that there were a lot that were about, witchy 101, and this is what you do with your candle, and making spells, and some were about the history, and then some were talking about Scott Cunningham and things like that. And so I was heartened to see that there was room for us, that our perspective is going to be a little bit different. So we're not, there's obviously interest in witchy stuff because of tons of witchy podcasts. But we're also unique in as much as the two of us, and we're all unique snowflakes.
I think we're unique.
Yeah, I think so too. I'm pretty sure.
Big shout out to you. Just so everyone knows, she is the tech witch.
Well, thank you. I think
I am the social media priestess.
There we go.
You are the tech witch.
There we go.
If I can speak for you, which I don't know if I can, but
I appreciate that. Yeah,
I hearken you, tech witch.
My pleasure. It was a lot of fun, and I felt a real sense of accomplishment. So thank you.
All hail the tech witch, Kimberlyn. Hail.
Thank you. Hail and welcome.
Hail and welcome, tech witch.
There we go. Okay. Well, so one last thing I'd like to just mention. because we were kind of talking about this beforehand, is that the beauty of this is that there's so many different types. So if people are coming to us for information on how to be a witch, we can tell you how we are a witch. And in fact, that's what this episode is about. But we can't speak for anyone else. And if you want information, there's so many good podcasts out there that are, Witchy 101, or, this is how it's been done in the past, and that sort of thing. So I'm happy to see that we have our own unique bent, but I'm also happy to say that for people for whom we're not going to be everybody's jam, mm-hmm. and for people who are looking for something else, there's plenty of things out there, and I encourage them to explore. And listen to us too, but whatever. Yes,
there are definitely plenty of 1/8 thread books on my shelf on how to be a witch that I started reading and then stopped.
Oh yeah. So I mean, we have our own unique viewpoint, and then there's tons of information. Some better than others.
So seek it.
Yes, indeed. Okay. So our episode today is what is witchiness, and I think the important thing to kind of get started with is, what is witchiness?
That may be a good place to start.
Oh, yeah. What do you think?
So what I found interesting is, so I've been on this path I've been actively trying to learn about it, reading about it, going to rituals, mm-hmm. for about 20 years now. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And she's making a face right now. And how long have you been on this path?
Actually, about the same amount of time.
Oh, really? I figured you were going to make a joke about,
no,
oh, sweet child, I was on this path.
Well, so here's, so I'll go ahead and say this. I actually, the same thing, really kind of dedicated to learning about it 20 years. I think I've been on the path maybe about 30, but I resisted for a long, long time just because of, my upbringing and things like that. So I was called to everything, and I just kept saying that that's not appropriate.
So I was finding it interesting. I have been on this path for about 20 years now, but I didn't really define it. Mm-hmm. I guess I never really sat down with my journal and said, okay, Leilani, define what is witchiness, because it was always a seeking. It was always a searching and a learning. It was always a growing. It was never this thing that I held in my hand and defined. So it wasn't until we kind of sat down and started chatting about this that I really got serious with, okay, how do I want to define it?
I like you're saying something, that you held in your hand that was about being defined, because I think I kind of journeyed the same path in as much as I was just kind of figuring out what I was and what I wanted and needed. And then later someone said, oh, are you a witch? And I thought, well, I guess so. But I never said, okay, I'm going to become a witch today, or mm-hmm. okay, I've decided I'm a witch, and now what does that mean? I kind of did it the other way. And so and it was only, I would say, maybe 10 years that I actually said something other than, oh, I'm a seeker, or I'm interested in feminine spirituality or the feminine divine, or, that kind of stuff, and actually said, oh, hell, I'm a witch. So,
that should be the title for our episode. Oh, hell, I'm a witch.
No, it's true, because, there's an acceptance there, right?
There is, I think.
And just as we may have had kind of a similar journey, I'm pretty sure, okay, I'll put it this way. We were both on the same train track, but you had different foods in the dining car, and I looked out at a window and saw different things. So we were kind of on the same track, but I would hazard a guess that pretty much everything else was different. And we both say we're witches, right?
Yeah, and I really love that word.
Mm-hmm. I
think I didn't really use that word until the past few years, but I really do love saying I'm a witch. I really love a lot of what it brings with the word. I think it does bring some rough patches especially culturally, with some people, some groups of people, but I really do love saying that I'm a witch and what that means to me personally.
So let's talk about what that means to you. So if you had to say, Okay, first off, let's start by saying, just as there's two people here with, different journeys, and we both consider ourselves witches, pretty much if you got 30 women who call themselves witches together in this room and listened to what they thought a witch was, we'd probably get anywhere between 20 to 29 different versions of it, right?
I would 100% agree with that.
So what would you say are some of the commonalities among all those women that we can say, okay, even if everything else is different, this is a witch?
I think for me, probably the biggest one would be some sort of connection to a larger sacred energy, probably present in nature, not necessarily forests, because forests are, I love running around the forests, but I think it's possible to be a witch and to live in New York City.
Yeah. So maybe it's not nature per se, though. When most people feel that sense of it, that's the closest description that we have. Some people call it God, right? Maybe it's just a connection with energy, or so when people talk about making magic, that they're really riding and manipulating and playing with energy.
Definitely. I think that energy that flows through, this is what I think, the energy that flows through everything, the rock, the chair you're sitting in, you, me, the candles on your altar that I'm looking at right now, it is that energy that is, to me, what I call the sacred, what others might call God or the goddess, or their, she has so many names.
Yes. Well, and so it's so funny because I went out for dinner with a friend, and I was telling her that we're going to be recording today, and she said, so, I've been meaning to ask, what is a witch? Or she said, I said about the different varieties of witches, that's what it was, and she said, so what are they? And so I started thinking, like there's kitchen witch, and then there's like the traditional, like there's Wiccan, which is something that's different. The word means the same thing, but
fun fact, not all witches are Wiccan.
Yes, thank you. That's true. Someone said, I bumped into someone. They said, oh yeah, we heard you're Wiccan. No, I'm not. And we have hedge witches and more ceremonial, the women who draw down the moon. I'm trying to think what else. Then there's women who are specifically goddess women, Dianic. We were talking about that a couple of days ago. So that idea that they just deal with feminine archetypes of the divine. So what else? I'm trying to think.
So I think I would describe myself as an energy witch. I am not super into ritual tradition. I do enjoy ritual itself, but I enjoy ritual for the fact that I am with others and we are creating and directing energy, whether it be high energy or we're syncing energy. But to me, everything about my faith is about energy, about moving energy, about creating it and directing it and experiencing it very viscerally in my body.
I remember last week you were talking about going to the rave and
yes.
and how you feel. And that's it. Probably you may not necessarily be thinking of it. And I don't know how you're thinking about it as ritualistic, but in a way you are doing some of the things that you would do in a ritual, right?
Absolutely. And I would even say that there are some musical artists that I have been at their concerts, and I venture a guess that they are witches.
Oh, name one.
Okay, I can name two.
Not to put you on the spot. Okay.
Rez, R-E-Z-Z,
really?
Rez. But a lot of her music has like witchy names, like the Witching Hour. She doesn't hide it at all. But also, I was at another concert for Porter Robinson.
Really?
And the way he handled energy, the way he structured his set, and he also showed pictures of leaves, which I was like, during like the energy raising portion of his set, and I started crying, and I was like, I turned around to my partner that I was with. I was like, I know what he's doing. I bet he's a witch.
Yes. Oh, and another fun fact is that not all witches are women. So they're the idea of being a witch, that of whatever that means, we haven't yet decided yet, runs through women and men. So wow, that's pretty neat. And there's and then you hear hints of it in other people. Like I know we were talking years ago about Katy Perry, and Her song "Rise" to me is
bring on the waterworks.
Oh my gosh, I sang this at in interdenominational church, and it was just, I felt my feet leaving the floor. I mean, and it's just amazing. That woman is incredible. So I don't know if she is or not, but she works energy. She may not necessarily.
I think so. And but what about you? Like, what type of witch would you describe yourself as?
Kind of like you. I'd say more elemental, because I do like to get out and play with fire or play with air. I like to, like, one day I just went out and lay in my backyard, and it took me a while because I'm from the city, so I had to say, if an ant is crawling on me, that's not a bad thing. It took me a while to kind of relax into it, and like the twigs and whatnot are in your skin and the whole bit. But when I stood up, like an hour later, I felt as if I had been washed clean. I felt as if I'd like just been born anew. So I really respond to that. But it's still energy though, and that's the thing. But the archetypes, for some people, the archetype of energy would be a certain goddess. So they would do Sekhmet if it's about holding the line and being strong and assertive, or I'm trying to think, maybe Tara for compassion, whereas I might think of a gentle breeze. So it's still the same archetype, but I respond to the elements, I think, a little bit easier than I do to a particular goddess.
I think that's true for me too. I don't have any data collected about this, although this would be an interesting study. But I venture a guess that a lot of witches do align themselves with gods and goddesses, but that definitely isn't true for me. I am more elemental, and I resonate with the elements and finding the sacred presence which is innately in them, and finding that to be how I, like you said, about finding that in the element and finding the work that I'm being called to do or to seek in the elements. But I've never really resonated with working with deities as much.
Nicely put. So let's, for the purposes of this show, say that we're not speaking for anyone else, but when we're talking about witchiness, a major part of that is this idea of working with, some people say magic, and we'll just call it energy, okay? And in some sort of would you say transformational way?
I think so.
Okay, because one of the things, so for example, and I may be getting ahead of myself, I think magic is taking a tomato and a squash, that these hard things or soft, and they're round, and then creating this wonderful stew that looks nothing like either one of them. And so that's transformation, right? That's mad. You're taking those two individual energies and you're making something, a soup or whatever. You're making something else. So, well, we can talk more about this in another time, but I'm wondering if there are times when you work with energy and you don't use it to transform something.
I don't know. So for me, magic is, like, whenever I talk to somebody, normally whenever I'm giving them the Witchy 101, whenever they're like, so what is going on? Yeah. And I do like here's what witchiness is to me, and I get the disclaimer, like, I'm not, I can't speak for everyone. And then I move into magic, and, they want to know, like, do you have a wand? Do you wave it around? The answer is sometimes.
Yes, of course.
And as an elemental witch, I would say that a stick makes a great wand.
Yes, it does indeed.
What is a wand if it is not a stick?
Exactly.
But for me, I would say magic. I explain it as saying magic is like prayer, but to me, a prayer is more of a request, an ask, an asking, a request, please, a polite request. And magic is what it is. It is what it is.
It is what it is.
It is a statement. It is like a declarative sentence.
You're just stating you're just stating your acknowledgement or your understanding of what's there.
Of what is becoming, or what is. So that's how I would define magic. It is what it is. It is me working to shape and to direct energy to make what is.
I like that.
One of the things that I think a lot of people ask me, either when they're trying to educate themselves because they love me and they want to know more about what's so important to me, or when they're seeking themselves, is, so if you're a witch, what do you believe then?
Right, yeah. And what's your answer?
Great question. My first answer is, so you know how in Christianity there's kind of a set dogma,
Mm-hmm.
and then within it there's a lot of variation between churches and things like that. There's really not that for being a witch. And normally that leaves them quite disappointed.
Well, you want something to grasp onto, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. There is definitely not a one-pager for what it means to be a witch.
So for many years, I thought, and it harmed. So there's a phrase, and it harm none. Do what thou wilt. Basically, she's trying to get a drink, and I don't know if she thinks it's gonna make too much noise. But anyway, so and it harm none. Do as thou wilt. And the idea being that as long as you don't hurt anyone, you are free to do anything you want. But then there are also witches who do hurt others. I mean, either for protection or, they just feel like that's a bad person. So we can't even say that that's an absolute that everyone does. I would, it's a beautiful. I mean, actually, it's a beautiful situation. It's hard for some people because they want more definition. But I think that this idea that we have to kind of create a label, one size fits all, is so much a part of what a witch is not, right? And
yeah, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when you say what you're saying, I hear all this gray area where, okay, so, and you harm none, do what you will. Okay, so if someone's breaking into my house, is that harming? Well, I am harming them, but I'm harming, well, what if somebody's doing something bad? Or what if somebody is doing something bad, but someone else thinks that bad thing is a good thing, and then what about doing a healing spell? Well, am I messing with what that person's own, it's just, everything is gray.
No, when you're doing a healing spell, you're killing off those bad cancer
right.
cells. You're killing cancer. What's wrong with you?
What's wrong with you? And you harm none. Haven't you ever read a Scott Cunningham book?
Right. So there's so much gray, and for me, I delight in the gray. I like to know that I can trust my intuition. I can do some thinking about it, and maybe ask some friends and sit and look at the situation, and then make that decision. Now, like they say, with great power comes great responsibility. Having that gray area means then, if I make a choice, if I commit to making a choice, then that means I commit to taking the consequences, to suffering them, to accepting them, to whatever.
Yeah, there is no excuse. There is no the devil made me do it. It's with the good news is that there are no rules. And the bad news is that there are no rules.
Exactly. And you and I like that when you said you can say like the devil made me do it, but if you're committing to now, and of course there are people who, we're humans, right? So there are people who will do something and then don't want to accept the consequences. But to me, a part of this responsibility, a part of this ability to sense and play with energy, means that then you're responsible for what that energy does.
Yes.
So, but others will disagree.
I think, and you and I are similar in this, but I think that others would disagree. But that very much is true for me, in that a lot of times people say, well, then how do you know what to do? How do you know what to believe? How do you know what's right and what's wrong? And the answer for me is I don't, and I work to learn it. And for me, being a witch means that it's more like a reclaiming and a returning to myself. It's a moving inward to seek and find what is true and what is right, and then moving through the world using my connection to the sacred, through the elements, through energy, to shape and affirm that rightness. But ultimately what that means is that comes back to me and my responsibility. There is no one I can point a finger at. The magic I do is my magic. The intent that I send out is my intent. And the will that I have is my will. And there's nothing and no one to blame other than myself.
That is so powerfully put, and it just made me think. And I know we said we weren't going to do any history, but all of those women who lived on the outskirts of town, and everyone they talked about them behind their back, but they went to them for the healing stuff. These were women who knew that, in my opinion, they accepted that by doing this, they're not going to be able to explain to people how they know what they know. Because it's their intuition, and our culture does not necessarily prize that. And so one of the things that they accepted was that they were not going to be understood. And I think it's a powerful position to take, because you have no one else to blame. You have no one else that you can even go to. In some cases, they probably had no one else that they could even talk this over with, right? Because they were probably the only one who admitted to being that way in their village, right? I'm sure there might have been other women who felt similarly. And so I think historically we see so many of these women who were shunned and scorned, and maybe in some cases persecuted, because they were willing to say they didn't know, even though their culture was telling them, no, we know, this is what you should be doing, right? And they said, I'm not sure. And they went ahead and did and made mistakes, and accepted they were making mistakes, and knew that they were making mistakes, but they didn't allow this pre-made system to tell them what they felt. They knew what they felt.
I think that is probably what causes our culture at large to be both curious but also afraid of what it means to be a witch. Because as I listened to you talk, what I kept thinking is, that makes it hard to control that woman. Like, you can't control her. Like, there's no dogma to lock her in. There's no, there's no...
to say that she's bad.
Exactly. There's no Bible verse to point at and say, like, hey, it says right here you shouldn't be doing that. Instead, and I'm speaking about myself too, like, I only have myself to turn to. I'm really grateful that we have our circle of so many women that are diverse, and other groups that you and I practice with that have men in it too. But ultimately, it comes back to me. It comes back to my own experience and my own thoughts and my own practice and my own journey with my faith, and seeking that to decide what to do and what is right.
And that is so scary, isn't it?
It can be so scary. And there are some times I mean, most of the time I love being a witch, but there are some times where I'm just like, geez Louise, can someone just tell me what to do? Is this right or is this wrong? Should I do this or should I not do this?
Right. Yeah, and I think I'm wondering if a number of women experience that little sense of, I don't have to do what they say, and then maybe get really scared and kind of shut that part down. And I speak from history, because, as I say, I've been kind of feeling this for 30 years. I've only been doing it for 20, and I remember reading Sage Woman, like picking it up in a Barnes & Noble and kind of looking at it and flipping each page.
Back in the days whenever they had books. This was a store full of books that you could go to. It's like an Amazon, but in person.
Exactly. Right.
Anyways, keep going.
And aside. So, but I just remember flipping through the pages of that, and everything in it resonated for me. And every time I turned a page, like, I felt my heart swell in my chest, and my gut kind of twist a little bit, because it was me. And then I think I opened it in the middle and was just flipping through, because you're the magazine rack. The magazine rack. Anyway,
it was a rack full of magazines. It was like your phone, but like in person.
Exactly. So so I was flipping through, and everything was just resonating. I was thinking, yes. And then I went back to the first page, and it said, the Journal of Witchcraft or whatever. I slammed that baby shut and put it back on the rack, and didn't think about it for another couple of years. And it took me a while the word scared me. The word witch scared me, and because the system told me what a witch is, and that couldn't have been me, so a part of this journey in just personal development and self-actualization and self-awareness was learning who I am, and then The label, we use witch because it's easiest, and I like the sound of it. It's like where my witch is at. But it could be called Fred, and it doesn't really matter. It's what I do. It's what I am.
I think I struggled too, like the way you found that sage woman back in the day when I went to bookstores. And I'd wander around the New Age section.
Oh my gosh, yes, that's another show altogether.
But I remember pulling out a lot of books, like the Guide to the Solitary Practitioner.
Mm-hmm. Oh yes.
Which, by the way, I don't know. I imagine it's a lot harder to be an energy witch if you're on your own.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of those things, face the east and raise your athame at such and such degree and repeat these words. And I remember trying all that, and
it wasn't you.
It was not. It was like wah wah. And also I didn't have like 3/4 of the things. It was like, what's that? Like, I don't own an athame. Like, what's that? Like a ritual dagger? I don't like. And I wasn't about to go buy it. So, but it didn't speak to me, and now I know. The reason it didn't speak to me is that's not how I am a witch. That's not how being a witch shows up for me. For some people it is.
And it's to see a ritual like that.
Absolutely. And I'm so grateful when I'm in sacred space with witches who that is their magic, because that sure isn't mine. Mm-hmm. But also, like, that's so cool that they have all these like really pretty ritual daggers mm-hmm. and altar cloths. But that's not how it resonates for me. So those books did not catch me. They did not bring me in. Instead, they made me go, I guess this isn't me. And that's why it took so long. That's why it took so long for me to find a community and to find who I was, because it is being in community that is being a witch to me, is the things that come with energy and singing and dancing and moving my body. And when I do that alone, it's really great, but it's like not, it doesn't bring to me what it does in community.
Yeah. So this is not about anything to do with what is witchiness, but since we're talking about this, so do you think now, though, because you have such a bankroll of memories and experiences and, in your body of doing communal stuff, do you think now if you had to do some solitary stuff for a while, you're out camping or you're whatever, that you could kind of recapture that feeling? You could draw upon it?
So that's things like that have happened with COVID.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Our circle is only allowing virtual Zoom things for the protection of the women in our circle, which I really appreciate and I 100% agree with. But I have, and I can, but boy, I don't know. Like, what is it? It's like, like making sushi at home is good. Mm-hmm. But man, when someone else makes that sushi for you, that sushi is great.
Yes.
And it's not that someone else is making it, but being there and having that experience is what makes it so great. The difference between seeing a movie in a movie theater and seeing a movie at home.
Yes.
There are a lot of great things about both, but wow.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Or being in the same room as 100 other people, maybe more. It's a bigger theater. And, when the hand comes up out of the ground, everyone's screaming at the same time. Yeah, no, I get that. So for you, it sounds like the community part of it is an important way for you to better access the energy.
It is. And I also think the community part of it is wonderful because it's like being in a library with all these books of different types of witchery.
Right.
And I love that there are plumbers, because I am not interested in plumbing, but thank goodness there's a plumber to fix my sink. Yeah, the same thing. Yeah. Like, I love that we have a beloved sister who does astrology.
Yes.
I love that we have all this variety that we can tap in our community that is not my calling, but wow, I get to benefit from their knowledge of runes.
So true. Yeah. So, of all of the things that we thought we would be talking about today, I think we've talked about 2. So this will be probably part 1 of what is witchiness, and we'll get back to doing a little bit more. But before we move into another part, I'd really like to talk about image in as a witch, and I mean, there's tons of different ways you can think of this, but so we have some pop culture images like Charmed and Tabitha. No, Sabrina the Teenage Witch.
Bewitched.
Bewitched, of course, yeah. Oh, Practical Magic.
Practical Magic.
Which is beautiful.
Oh, The Craft.
The Craft. Yeah, so we have these, and I wonder, you were saying it took you a while to kind of plow through all of these different ways of being a witch, and so I thought maybe we could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, and I think you and I both talked about how. So it's funny because it came up with us making this podcast. Whenever I struggled to call you to ask you if you would be willing to do this, a big part of my trepidation was feeling afraid that I wasn't witchy enough. I'm not really a witch. Other people are more witchy, and I could and I've listed a million.
Yeah, like what gives you the right to talk about witchy?
Why should I, or who should? These people that I really admire, they should. Or my old roommate, she's a witch. Mm-hmm. But through talking with you, no, I am one too.
Yes. And while they actually should be doing podcasts, and
I know, listening, hello.
We'll maybe push them towards that. But yeah, I mean, our experience, there's others who might be a little shinier or more visible, or we know that they're like super juicy in terms of this, but we also have experience, and the beauty of thinking about this is that it helps us to overcome that imposter syndrome. Am I a witch? Am I a witch? I don't have an athame. Am I a witch? I'm a witch.
I don't do astrology. I'm not a witch.
Yeah. So, I haven't been dedicated to this goddess for 10 years, or I'm trying to think of some of the things.
I didn't grow up in a witchy household.
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh.
So I'm not a real witch. Yeah. I'm just like, it's for fakesies, not for realsies.
Or if you keep, or the not so much fakesies, but I'm just I don't really know enough, and eventually I will know enough, and then I can call myself a witch. You know, that kind of stuff. And it took me a while to get over that. And when people started calling me a witch, that helped.
It helps.
Yeah. But and I think that that's across the board in anything you do, and I think that that's also something that's kind of, our culture really breeds that in our women. Mm-hmm. We're encouraged to think that in so many different ways. But one of the outcomes I'm hoping from the podcast is just allowing people to just say, I am what I am. I'm going to call it a witch. I'm going to call it Fred. I'm going to call it, whatever. But accepting where you are.
Yeah, I think that a jogger does not say that a wrestler is not an athlete.
Oh my gosh, that's fabulous.
They may, but mm-hmm. Being a jogger doesn't make a wrestler not an athlete. And being an Olympian doesn't mean that the person who runs triathlons on the weekends for fun is not just as much an athlete. Mm-hmm. I was thinking about this the past couple of days as I preparing for talking with you. And so, because I was thinking, why do I judge myself so much? Because I say, well, I'm not a witch because a witch is this thing, mm-hmm. and I point to these other people. But then I think, no, not being that doesn't mean being what I am makes me not that. It just means that there's diversity and that it can look different, and honoring and respecting that diversity is part of what makes being a witch so rich and vibrant, I think.
I totally agree. I think when we went to California Witch Camp, mm-hmm. and I just the people in my cabin. So California Witch Camp is a camp
for witches
in California.
Okay,
there. I guess I didn't really need to explain that. But so we're in cabins, and it's beautiful, and it's cold, and there's a lot of mosquitoes. But anyway, but there were 4 women in my cabin, and every single woman was different. Our experiences were different. Just even going to bed at night, different practices. And it's a beautiful thing, and we all called ourselves witches, and enough to go to California Witch Camp, mm-hmm. right? So, I love the fact that this is a practice, a spiritual practice that encourages each person to be the best them, and then be a part of this larger community if that's what they so desire. That it doesn't tell them you have to do A, B, C, and D. And then do this when you're 13, and then do this kind of stuff to be considered this. So I love that athlete. Yeah,
I think that that's part of what makes being a witch so powerful and so beautiful and so scary for me.
Yes.
It's that, oh, I'm a witch because I say I'm one. And if someone doesn't think that I am one, well,
screw them.
So what?
Okay, you're more gentle than I am.
Any harm none. Any harm none.
Any harm none.
Do what you will.
Exactly. So one of the things that a number of our women do is, divinatory practices, tarot and scrying and things like that. Yeah, and I think I have a Ouija board, so we need to. But anyway, but I digress. But again, these are different ways that these women respond. I mean, so it would be just as faulty for me to say to really experience the divine, you have to drum and chant like I do. Because that's not, they want to sit with their tarot cards and let the cards speak to them. And that's the beauty of what we do, is that we have room for all of that, and we appreciate all of that. So,
agreed.
Thank you. So to bring our episode on what is witchiness to a close, we're going to read a fabulous poem called Witches, funnily enough, by a poet, a spoken word artist called Fleecy Malay. And I'm probably totally mispronouncing her name, but that's what we're going to go with right now.
This spoken word poem is she performs it, and so you can see it on YouTube. We'll link it in our show notes. And it went viral. It was even featured on The Wild Hunt, which is like a common pagan witchy news writing thing. She's a poet, she's a speaker, she's a coach. She calls herself queer. She calls herself an advocate for women's rights and LGBTOI rights. She's, in my experience of looking at the things she creates, she's just a fierce advocate for showing up as you unapologetically, and I find that incredibly witchy. Yeah,
incredibly. We're going to read this, but as Leilani noted, if you can find her reading this on the internet, we are just a pale imitation of the passion and the beauty of her performance. I mean, it's an incredible performance. So we highly recommend that you go and listen to hers. But this is our contribution to it.
This poem is from her book called Virago, A Poetic Manifesto, and that's published by Elise Maynard, which is Fleecy Malay. In the past, they burned us because they thought we were witches, just because we knew what to do with herbs outside the kitchen, because we knew how to dance, how to seduce, how to pray, because we moved with the cycles of the moon.
In the past, they burned us alive because they knew that we are witches. So now we cast spells with our mouths, pieces of our hearts spill out. It is incredible, the power of a woman who is not afraid to say no.
No, we won't sit any longer while you ponder on our rights, on the rights to give or not give life, on our rights to make another woman our wife, on our rights to be safe, to get paid an equal wage, to have a voice and a place where we might make a change.
It is incredible, the amount of ways they have slayed just to keep us small. If they could have, they probably would have burnt us all. But they couldn't with fire, so they did it with words. Laid down laws to determine the amount of our worth. They kept us in contracts. They separated our circles, erased us from pages, and made labor-saving devices our saviors.
It is incredible how quickly knowledge can fade, how much effort was invested to leave us astray.
But we will not come quietly.
Well, there's another thing they tried to take away, our rights to exclaim our orgasms ecstatically. We will not come quietly. We will open our mouths and let our spells spill out. Cast poetic prayers into the night so that every woman can hear the howl of our sister's delight, reminding her that her voice deserves to be heard.
Let her jaw drop. Let her shame stop. Let her body scream under the self-pleasure of what it means to be a woman who can speak freely. You see words, they carry meaning. They have fooled us for so long that no means yes. So much so that I'm almost impressed, except I finally discovered they're right.
So I've claimed back that no as mine, because every no I throw against their forces is another yes I retain for my own self-worth.
It is a spell cast for my own protection. It is incredible, the power of a woman who is not afraid to say no.
And this old witch, I'm done with broomsticks. I'm done with know your place. This witch knows that some knowledge just won't fade. That every woman is my sister. Through the hubble and the bubble and the toil and the trouble, we grow stronger when we cast our spells together.
We entered the fire. Now we rise from the ashes, and we are holding our candles and lighting our matches until the night becomes lighter and our voices can grow, because we have remembered we are witches and we have learned to say no.
So if you're feeling like the poet Malay and feeling called to use the word witch, or if you're on your journey, wherever it takes you, we hope that this episode has helped to bring you to an understanding, or at least a little bit of an understanding of what it is for you and I to be a witch.
Yes, thank you so much for being with us, and we will see you in our next episode, which is Samhain. Yay! Or Halloween, if that's how you roll.
Our episodes are coming out every second and fourth Friday of the month, so keep an eye out for that. You can follow us and on social media, and we really encourage to help more people find us, especially since we're new. We're new here, not to being a witch, but to the podcast world. Mm-hmm. But it would really help us if you would be interested to rate and review us on whatever platform you get your podcasts from. That can help other people find us too.
Thank you.
Thank you. We hope you've enjoyed the magic that has unfolded here at Witchy Wit.
Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Witchy Wit Podcast.
Email us at witchywit123@gmail.com. Rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Get exclusive content and support us on Patreon.
Stay witchy, y'all!